All right, hello YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time. Once again, let's talk metal. Tonight we're going deep on one of my favorite bands of all time, CIRITH UNGOL, the legendary doomy powered out heavy metal band from California. A band I've loved for decades that, until very recently haven't gotten their due. In a way, they remind me a lot of Manila Road. The two bands have a lot of things in common. They did some of the absolute best American heavy metal during the 1980s, but both bands were completely overlooked at the time and kind of got relegated into the dustbin. Manila Road and CIRITH UNGOL both started to get some recognition around the turn of the century, but Manila Road got the band back together and cranked out a ton of albums in the years after that, whereas CIRITH UNGOL didn't actually reform until much more recently, and as such, their discography is a lot shorter. So we're going to work our way through it here this evening. In some ways, I think having the shorter discography plays to their strengths. While Manila Road's got a lot of great stuff in their catalog, their sound changed over the years as they kept, plugging away at it. And some of their albums are, not really that essential compared to others. They've got a lot of killer stuff, of course, but there are some albums I can do without. CIRITH UNGOL, on the other hand, every album is a stone cold classic. There's just no weak links in the chain whatsoever. It's just that the chain is much shorter because the band was essentially laid to rest for a very long time. So, where to begin? First, let's cover the pronunciation thing. The band pronounces the name CIRITH UNGOL, and it's their band, and they can say it however they want to. That's absolutely fine. The name comes from Tolkien. It's an Elvish phrase that means Pass of the Spider, referring to an area in the mountains where one of the giant spiders lived. In that Elvish tongue, however, words that begin with the letter C tend to have the hard K sound almost all the time. So the name should be pronounced CIRITH UNGOL, which is why I tend to say CIRITH UNGOL. But whether you're going to say CIRITH or CIRITH, it's a semantics thing, not something that we have to dwell on heavily. Just wanted to clear it up because I do pronounce it differently than the band and a lot of other folks do. Let's get on to the good stuff, the actual music involved. So Greg Lindstrom and company were kicking around as early as 1972, about a decade before they would actually appear on most people's radar, jamming a bit, recording a few things at home. They didn't actually have any demos hit circulation until about 1978. Two demos came out in the late 70s. You have one called the Orange Album that came out in 1978. And on this one, you can hear an early version of Atom Smasher and a bunch of songs that didn't really get recorded for much else. That album has been made available through the band's Bandcamp page, so you can download it there. They did a limited print run of cassette copies of it several years ago, so there are some physical copies out there as well. They also did a follow-up demo in 1979 that featured a few more of the songs that would eventually appear on their first album. Now, I do want to play some clips as we go along this evening. I'm always surprised at how many people I come across who haven't ever really checked out CIRITH UNGOL much, so this is a chance to hear just a little bit of what they sound like. I'm going to start with a little bit of one of the demos taken from that Orange album session, the Orange demo from 78, and this is a song called High Speed Love. All right, that kind of gives you an idea of what the band's going for. They've got this kind of very heavy power rock vibe going on, fun stuff. Obviously, still working out the kinks and such, but kind of cool stuff. Some of these early demos can also be found, by the way, on an anthology called Servants of Chaos. This is a 2 CD set and does include some of the stuff that they recorded back in the 70s, as well as some other material. It's a really, really good set if you're a CIRITH UNGOL fan. Haven't picked this up, I would highly recommend it. If you're new to the band, I'm not sure it's the best place to start. I'd probably start with some of their studio albums instead. but Servants of Chaos, great treasure trove for the diehards out there. All right, so after this, the band would get around to recording their first album in 1981. It came out late that year, around October, and was called Frost and Fire. The band was always very fortunate in having killer cover art done by a friend and associate of theirs, Michael Whalen, who used different images of Elric. This is the albino elf from the Michael Moorcock series with, the sword Stormbringer and all that. So yeah, always had absolutely killer cover art, and this album is no exception at all. Frost and Fire came out on their own Liquid Flames imprint originally, and there's a few different pressings of it if you're a completist. The variations are pretty minor. It depends on things like, are the kneeling skeleton logo, is it on the back cover, not on the back cover? Is it on the labels of the record, not on the labels of the record? So not major differences, just some little things here and there if you really want to get the different versions of it. So with this album, even though it's come out in 1981, it still does have, some of the sound from their demos on it. And just, to offer a little proof of that, we'll check out a snippet here from the title track, which of course is Frost and Fire. So that gives you a good idea. Again, still very, powered out sounding stuff, very heavy, plucking the notes, very powerfully. The band is led by the just apocalyptic vocals of Tim Baker. Nobody really sounds like him in heavy metal, and he adds, a huge dimension of character and grit to the band. I've always loved his voice, just these insane howls of anger and fury and flat out chaos, which is a phrase that was often associated with the band. So Frost and Fire got the band off to a reasonably good start. They would also then be featured on the first Metal Massacre compilation in 1982. So this, of course, was the release that eventually kind of helped get Metal Blade Records up and running. Brian Slager was featuring bands from the California scene, which CIRITH UNGOL was definitely part of. They are definitely one of the heavier bands on that compilation. Even on that comp, they feel a little out of place compared to the other bands. Of course, the original persons had the fledgling demo from Metallica. You had bands like, Rat and Steeler featured on it, or, intended to be on it. Motley Crue was supposed to be on it. And then you have, this, heavy track called Death of the Sun from CIRITH UNGOL. So, yeah, even at the time, they felt a little out of step with their contemporaries, but the music is just poundingly heavy and still awesome. All right. Now, after Frost and Fire, a longtime contributor Greg Lindstrom would step aside, although he would never really be that far away from the band. And so by the time they got to their sophomore album, they had brought in Flint on bass and put out an album through Enigma, also tied in, of course, to Metal Blade at the time, called King of the Dead. And this is, in most people's opinion, their best work. If you ask most folks what's their favorite CIRITH UNGOL album, this is the one they're going to mention right away. Once again, absolutely fantastic cover art by Michael Whalen. I've got both Frost and Fire and King of the Dead framed on the walls behind me with LP covers. This shows the band tightening up and maturing some, leaving a little bit of that kind of fuzzed out power rock thing behind them, and just working a good, heavy, solid heavy metal sound. So let's check out one of the classic tracks on here for a moment. This is called Atom Smasher. yeah, just absolutely howling away on Atom Smasher. This album really sees Jerry Fogel on guitar come into his own. Great guitarist, did lots of cool stuff. Flint on the bass sounds great. Robert Garvin, the crazy guy behind the drum kit, pounding away. CIRITH UNGOL just doesn't, in my opinion, have many contemporaries. Nobody else was doing something that sounded much like this in 1984. They always had, their own unique sound, which is one reason I like them so much. It's hard to pigeonhole them. Are they U.S. power metal? Kind of, but not really. They have this very heavy, almost doomy vibe to them. But are they American doom metal? Don't really think so either. They're a little too powerful and forceful for that. They don't quite fit. They take, they've obviously got a huge epic flair, but it's a much rawer, dirtier, kind of gritty, tense sound compared to what we often think of as epic metal today. There's all these elements flying around. At the end of the day, it's simply CIRITH UNGOL. They've got their own voice. So, fantastic album, a lot of classic songs. For my money, it's not their best album, as much as I do love it. I have a different favorite that we'll get to in just a bit here. So, sadly, King of the Dead did not allow the band to conquer the world. And so, in 1986, they would release One Foot in Hell. So this is LP number 3. Came out with Restless. Metal Blade also, of course, licensed it at one point. And this one, has, again, Wailing cover art. This is probably my least favorite cover just because it's very dark, so there's not as much detail towards it, but still very cool with the, the giant, bug insect horror thing on the cover. The Elric figure is a bit more subdued in the background, almost looks more like, a statue or something. So the cover just doesn't have quite the same energy as the images used for their other ones, but still quite cool. This was the first full album I heard by CIRITH UNGOL, and in some ways it's my favorite. I feel it's the one that's possibly the most forceful, has a little bit more up-tempo material towards it, and it kicks off right away with an absolute killer track called Blood and Iron. So let's check out a snippet of that before I gush about it just a little bit more. So yeah, I absolutely love this song. It's one of the best album openers I've ever heard. The fact that they waste no time getting straight into it. There's just that quick little drop beat, and then Tim's already howling in your face. You have no time to prepare for it. You have no time to get a feel for what's this song going to be like. It's just like 1, 2, blam. Takes off absolutely perfectly. Love the way they structure the song. Love it as the first track on the album. Gives you no time to adjust. Tons of great stuff on here, like Doomed Planet, which was the namesake for the Doomed Planet Records label that, did some cool stuff years ago. Just another fantastic album. This one maybe doesn't get mentioned as often as it should by folks. Again, it lives a little bit in the shadow of King of the Dead, but just as good, killer stuff. It's still classic CIRITH UNGOL. While most people think of the lineup of, Tim Baker, Jerry Fogel, Flint, and Rob Garvin as, the classic CIRITH UNGOL lineup, it's interesting to note that they only made these 2 albums together. Again, Flint wasn't on the debut. Greg Lindstrom was on that one. And by the time you get to album number 4, there's been a major reshuffle in the band. After the lack of success, and again, these guys have been plowing away at it for a while by this point, and things just not really going anywhere. Both Flint and Jerry would leave the band before album number 4 would get recorded, and it would be 5 years before that album saw the light of day. And that one is known as Paradise Lost, which also came out on Restless Records. Another killer image of Elric on the cover, courtesy of Mr. Whalen. This album has a real difficult history. There's a lot of baggage with this album. You've got two new members who came in, and it's no secret they brought in some different sounds and styles and influences with them that did affect some of the tracks on the album. Uh, Rob Garvin, in particular, has always been very articulate about the issues the band had fighting the record label, fighting the producer, and just the general frustration that they had, very little input into how the finished product turned out, and they were extremely dissatisfied, left a terrible taste in their mouth. Garvin's left reviews in lots of places over the years saying that, this album was absolute trash and garbage, and just it really was the thing that broke the band, just this horrible experience of getting this thing put together. That all said, I respect his opinion. I'm sure, it was pretty traumatic to deal with all that crap at the time. All of that aside, this has some of the finest CIRITH UNGOL material on it in their entire catalog. This is easily the album I have played the most over the past 20 years from CIRITH UNGOL's discography. It does have its problems, absolutely. It is a flawed masterpiece. Let's walk through this one in a little detail, just because it is a more complex album. We'll play some clips in a minute, but let's look at this track list. It starts off brilliantly with Join the Legion. This is classic CIRITH UNGOL. It's as good a track as they'd laid down on any of the previous albums. So you're off to just a fantastic start. Then you have The Troll. The Troll is a CIRITH UNGOL song for sure, but it's a very short one. Runs under 4 minutes, and it ends very abruptly. For me, it always feels like the song never quite has a chance to get into gear, and then just suddenly wraps up. And as such, it feels like a little bit of a miss. After that, you've got a cover of the track Fire, the sort of legendary, crazy track by The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. And that should be a fantastic cover choice for CIRITH UNGOL. They always had, the image of fire and chaos and stuff associated with the band. And, for whatever reason, maybe just, all the bad blood and stuff going on, fighting the producer and such, this cover just is a complete flop. It's slow, it's plodding, there's no life or energy about it at all. It should have been a perfect cover song for them, and they deliver it. It's just very lifeless. Quite a letdown that they didn't deliver on that track, because it could have been a good inclusion for them. Track 4 is called Heaven Help Us. This is one, it definitely feels like it came in from one of maybe the newer members. It is not a bad song. It's just not a good CIRITH UNGOL song. It doesn't have any of the heaviness. It doesn't have the right vibe about it whatsoever. You're listening to it, and it's just like all of a sudden you're like, is this still Paradise Lost? Did I fall asleep and the CD changer rotated to something else? It's very, very out of place. Okay, so we just went through 3 songs that are not so hot. Feels like Join the Legion was a long time ago. But you get to track 5, Before the Lash, goes right back to classic, menacing, crushing CIRITH UNGOL goodness. Track 6 is technically a cover song. It's called Go It Alone. It is the worst thing CIRITH UNGOL ever recorded. It's almost a pop rock song. It just has no business in their catalog. The deal is that it's originally by a band called Prophecy, who apparently were sort of buddies of CIRITH UNGOL on the California scene. I guess they played together a bunch of times and such. One of the new members that had come into the band on guitar, Jim Barraza, was from Prophecy. So I'm guessing that was kind of a nod to his legacy and their friendship with the band. Excuse me there. I'm losing my voice a little bit here this evening. So I get that, maybe he wanted to bring a track from his old band in, or they wanted to, kind of, give a nod to their friends. It's just an awful song for CIRITH UNGOL, though. I'm not familiar with Prophecy. I don't know what style they were playing in. Maybe it was a great song for that band. It had no business in CIRITH UNGOL's catalog. It just didn't. So that's that. We have 3 tracks left, and they're possibly CIRITH UNGOL's finest hour. It's a basically a 3-part little saga with the songs Chaos Rising, Fallen Idols, and Paradise Lost, all tying together as kind of one long story arc. And these three songs will stand up against any other three tracks they ever recorded in terms of heaviness, grandeur, menace, atmosphere. They're unsurpassed. So, as an example, let's click and check out just a little bit of the track Paradise Lost. So yeah, CIRITH UNGOL at their finest with Paradise Lost. Again, there were a lot of things going on studio-wise that, just and label-wise that pissed the band off a lot. They were very unhappy with the final mix of the album. They reportedly were not really allowed anywhere near it while the tracks were being mixed down and the final version put together, and they were kind of appalled at how it sounded at the end. There are some demo versions of a few tracks from Paradise Lost that are on that Servants of Chaos anthology that I showed a little bit earlier. Just for comparison, let's check out the version of Paradise Lost that is included there. So this is a demo the band did before going into the studio. So this is an earlier take on the same track we just listened to. Here's the demo of Paradise Lost. All right, so you can kind of hear there that, it may be a bit of a cliche, but I do think the demo is better. The band has a point. That song, even the demo version, has got a heaviness to it that's a little missing due to the production on the finished product. That said, it is still a fantastic song and shouldn't be slagged just because, it got a bit gunked up production-wise in the studio. Some other things to note. The demo version's about 15 seconds longer because there's a couple of bars in the middle where the band just hammers on this really heavy driving rhythm, and that part got cut out of the album. Why? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you skimp on 15 extra seconds in the middle of a song when the band's absolutely slaying it? Doesn't make any sense. What can you do? Other things that have been an issue with this album over the years, it got almost no promotion when it came out, and for a very long time, it was difficult to find copies of this. Restless refused to reissue it. Even the cassette and the original CD copies in like the late 90s and early 2000s, they would even sell for, $25, $30 or more on eBay because you couldn't find it anywhere. The Digipack I'm holding now, this came out sometime in the early 2000s, and It's on a weird label, and it's sort of a semi-official thing. What was this on? Rot Records? My understanding is that they had permission from Restless to do this, but the band never signed off on it. And so, the band considered it sort of an unofficial release. So it really wasn't until 2016 that this got an official, proper reissuing. In the meantime, there's a vinyl bootleg pressing that was done in Greece. And for a long time, that was the only way to get it on vinyl. So, yeah, a complicated album with a messed up history, but at the end of the day, you have 5 absolutely stone cold classic tracks on it. And I think that more than makes up for the tracks that are a little bit weak on the album. And sure, I understand if the band doesn't look fondly upon it, but I think it is an absolutely fantastic album at the end of the day. It would be their last album for a long time. After all those bad experiences, the band went their separate ways, and that was the end of the CIRITH UNGOL story for a very long time. Now, the band had developed a big cult following, and as you got more and more into the 2000s, and some of these older bands started coming back out of the woodwork, some of these big European festivals got bigger and bigger. A big draw for them, of course, was to kind of entice these legacy bands back out of retirement and to come back and let the younger fans see them who weren't around to catch those shows back in the 80s. And this was something for a long time CIRITH UNGOL didn't really bite on. And I saw, different things in different places. They were certainly approached by some of the bigger European festivals early on. Sometimes it was reported, that Tim Baker wasn't interested. Other times it was reported the band just didn't feel it was right because Jerry Fogel had passed away around 1998. And, they just didn't see themselves wanting to, try to come back in, with a different guitarist and stuff. And so for a long time, there wasn't much activity. And there wasn't a ton of, again, as I said, there weren't a lot of reissues or tributes or anything else floating around either. In those years after Paradise Lost, there was a single put out on Old Metal Records. I'm not sure it was 100% legit, to be honest. There were a couple of things on that label that were, maybe done without some permissions. I don't think anybody made a big deal out of that one in particular. There's the Servant of Chaos comp in 2001. They got, some people looking at the band. But then you didn't have anything else for 16 years when a box set called The Legacy came out. And it was around this time that, finally pieces started to fall back into place. And in 2018, CIRITH UNGOL fans were amazed and overjoyed to hear that the band was putting out a new song for the first time. It was called Witch's Game. It was just a single track. It was originally put up on Bandcamp and later pressed up as a 12-inch vinyl. Nobody really knew what to expect at this point. They were going to have, Jim Barraza back on guitar. This was, the guy that had been on the Paradise Lost album. And joining them on bass because Flint, was approached but was not interested in getting back together. So they did have to get a new bass player, and they brought in Jarvis Leatherby, who is known for work with Night Demon. Greg Lindstrom was also coming back into the band, so they were going to be operating as a 5-piece here. It's been reported widely that Jarvis had a lot to do with kind of getting the band motivated to, really go ahead and, at least put in some festival appearances, come back, for at least one last hurrah. And it worked out brilliantly. The song was incredibly good. Fans were astonished at how it sounded like they hadn't missed a beat. It was just, maybe a year and a half since Paradise Lost had come out, and the band was ready to keep on rolling. So the song was incredibly well received, and the band was also then getting out there and doing some of these big reunion shows, and they were going over great. So yeah, this led to, and double checking the date here, yeah, they had shows, 2017, 2018. And so by 2019, you had this get released on Metal Blade. I'm Alive. It's a 3-disc set. It's got 2 CDs of live material and 2 DVDs. Sorry, 4-disc set. I think I said 3 a minute ago. So yeah, you've got stuff recorded live. Let's see, at the Hammers Festival from 2017. You've got let's see, on the DVDs. You also have the Up the Hammers Festival from 2017, but you've also got where's the other one? The Rock Hard Festival from May 2018 on here. I don't tend to watch a ton of live footage. I just don't, but the performances are very good on here. They're playing all the classic songs and sound really great at it. So I had to pick this up. Fun set. And soon after, we learned that CIRITH UNGOL was going to be releasing a new album for the first time since Paradise Lost. And that would result in this one, Forever Black, which came out in 2020. 2020, of course, rather unfortunate year in the course of mankind's history, but CIRITH UNGOL absolutely nailed it with their comeback album. Great sound from the band. It really is like they had just been unfrozen and were right back at it. Let's play just a quick snippet of this sort of proof of concept that the band had not lost their touch. This is one of my favorite tracks from the album called Frost Monstream. I may skip the intro and jump into the middle somewhere. Or maybe not. Haven't lost a beat. Still just this insane crushing heaviness. Tim Baker sounds like not a day has passed. Voice still just absolutely magnificent for this kind of material. So the band was back and at long last, started to get some of those accolades that they deserved decades earlier. But hey, I guess better late than never. Since Forever Black came out in 2020, they were featured in Decibel and had one of those flexy 7-inch singles included with the issue for a track called Brutish Manchild, which is an absolute kind of knuckle-dragging killer of a song. And in 2021, they put out an EP called Half Past Human. That's got, a little bit of new stuff, and a little bit of old stuff, and fun release as well. What does the future hold for CIRITH UNGOL? I don't know. I really, really hope that they keep things going. They obviously have still got the magic. They've still got the touch. And if they still have music in them, I definitely would love to hear it. It's been one of my favorite bands for a long time. And again, while the discography is short, there's just not many chinks in that armor. Everything about the band, just, this, cool outsider, vibe, the crazy headbands, from Tim Baker, even just, the kneeling skeleton logo always looked so cool. And when you look closely, they're forming the sign of Omega, which is something you're just staring at it one day. It suddenly clicks. I'm just like, oh my fucking God, they just got even cooler. A lot of people would never catch that. On a live stream a couple of months ago, I just mentioned that in passing. And one or two people in the chat were just always like, oh, holy crap, I never noticed that at all. It's those little subtle touches that, just help put that band over the top when the music is anything but subtle. Something kind of fun to note in closing, one of the interview clips with the band in that I'm Alive set, it's kind of talking about, their sound, where they get this, crazy, heavy, raw, doomy, angry vibe from. And their answer is kind of curious, but also makes perfect sense. They kind of laugh it off. And it's like, a big part of it is, if you listen closely, all of our songs are protest songs. We're just a bunch of old California hippies, and we're just griping and complaining about everything in the world. We're just doing it with these very colorful metaphors, but it's all California protest music, man. And when you look at it through that lens, it's no less cool. It still works very well. All right, so that is going to do it for that. The works of CIRITH UNGOL. Hopefully, the future has even more to come. Now, let's talk metal in the comments down below. What is your take on CIRITH UNGOL? Your own personal favorites? Are you a King of the Dead fanatic? There's tons of them out there. Or do you prefer one of the other albums in their amazing catalog? If this is a band you haven't ever checked out, maybe this will be the impetus to go and give them a listen. Maybe one of the song clips caught your interest. Start with that. Any of those albums, especially the two 80s albums, I guess, are where you should start. King of the Dead or One Foot in Hell. That's going to give you the best experience. Paradise Lost does have those few oddball songs, and Frost and Fire has a little bit more of that retro sound to it that's not indicative of everything they did later. But yeah, I would start with one of those two albums. What do other folks think? Would you recommend something else? Hey, you could also just start with Forever Black. That would give you a fine introduction to the band as well. All right, time to shut up about CIRITH UNGOL for tonight. Until next time, everybody take care and keep banging your head, even if it's a flaming skull or two.